So let me just start by saying a very warm welcome to all of you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Claire Cable, and I'm the Chief Executive and Nurse Director of the Queen's Nursing Institute Scotland. We are a small charity making a big difference and have been since 1889. QNIS supports, develops and inspires Scotland's community nurses and midwives to become catalysts for social change. We help build on their clinical expertise to become an active force for a healthier, kinder, fairer, greener Scotland. These winter wellbeing evenings have been the idea of Queen's nurse Jess Davidson, who suggested that alongside professional support, nurses were going to need a way to decompress during these challenging winter months. By connecting with generous artists and writers who wanted to give something back, we are delighted to have a whole series of virtual events this winter. If you look at the pinned tweet on our Twitter account, which is QNI_Scotland, you'll see more details of the other events we have planned. 2 weeks ago, we hosted Stuart A. Patterson for an evening of Scots poetry. For anyone who missed it, the recording's available on our YouTube channel and our website. We're grateful to be able to share this evening with Victoria Whitworth, a writer living in Edinburgh, whose memoir, Swimming with Seals, has sea swimming in Orkney as its main theme. But it also covers archaeology, landscape, time, loss, grief, and the nature of knowledge. So we're really looking forward to our conversation this evening. Just to let you know, coming up on the 24th of March, Christy Watson, author of The Courage to Care and former nurse, is in conversation with Tim Barrow. Tim was born in Edinburgh. He's a writer, actor, filmmaker, who's graciously allowed QNIS to screen his feature-length film Riptide for free. Riptide is described as a love story, and it's available to watch on our website from now until the event in March. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our host for this evening, Rona Hotchkiss. Rona is a QNIS fellow and trustee, and we're delighted that she is with us this evening to introduce Victoria and host the evening for us. So over to you, Rona. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I'll just wait until Tasha gets me on video, if we can. Okay, here we go. Thank you very much, Claire. So as Claire said, yes, I'm lucky enough to be a trustee and a fellow of the Queen's Nursing Institute, being as I am an ex-nurse myself. So let me explain the format of the next 35-40 minutes or so. In a moment or two, I will introduce Victoria. She will then read 2 passages from her work. Then I will ask a couple of extremely intelligent and exceptionally incisive questions. So obviously I got my partner to write them for me. Victoria will then read again, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers between yourselves and Victoria. If you have a question to ask, if something occurs to you at any point, please put it in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. And if I call on you to ask your question, we will unmute you so you can ask it yourself, but don't panic. We won't put the video on, so you don't have to rush off and brush your hair or put on lip hair, any of that kind of thing. So Victoria Whitworth is an historian specialising in medieval languages, literature and archaeology. She was a lecturer in Nordic studies at UHI and has written novels, a memoir and academic works. That memoir, as Claire said, Swimming with Seals, is set largely in the seas around Orkney, where Victoria plunges into water cold enough to make into wee ice cubes for your gin without further reference to a freezer. The memoir has been described as evocative, astute, beautiful, original, eloquent, refreshing and calming. And I would concur with all of that. In fact, some of those may have been my words. And with that, I will now say welcome, Victoria, and over to you.
Okay, is that working? Can you hear me, Rona? Marvelous. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I feel a bit challenged by coming after Stuart Patterson, who is so brilliant and funny and writes very different things from me. So I'll try and you know, keep up to his standards. I'm going to talk mostly about Swimming with Seals, which is my memoir this evening, and start by reading a bit from that. The structure of the book took me a while to figure out, because when you look back at your past and you think, how do I shape all these little bits of memory and narrative? It's quite hard to find some underpinning structure. And the book actually had its origins in Facebook posts, because I was living in Orkney at the time. I'm in Edinburgh now, and I was swimming in the sea pretty well every day. And my publisher said to me, oh, well, you know, swimming is very fashionable, and wild swimming and islands are very fashionable. Why don't you write a book? And I thought, oh goodness, you know, I write books about archaeology and art history, and I write historical fiction, but I don't write memoirs. And then I looked at the Facebook posts that I'd been posting about my swimming, and it had become a way of becoming very present while I was swimming. This is, if you know Orkney, it's the sands of QNIS on the north coast of the West Mainland. In Orkney, and going to the same beach every day and thinking about how every swim was different from every other swim, and then going and writing a little kind of 300-word prose poem Facebook post about it had become very, very therapeutic for me. And I pulled all the Facebook posts together and I looked at them, and they certainly didn't make a book, but they became little narratives, little self-contained narratives dropped into the bigger structure. And then it occurred to me that they were like beads on a necklace. And then in the process of writing the book, it became, if you like, this love letter to that beach, the sands of Evie, sands of QNIS, and to the archaeology and to the landscape, the history, my own experience, the folklore. And one of the archaeological sites that's visible from QNIS, this is across Ainhallow Sound and over on Rousey, is Westness. And Westness is originally a Pictish cemetery, 7th and 8th century. And then when the Vikings arrive in Orkney in the 9th century and take over, they started burying their dead in the earlier Pictish Christian graves, but the Vikings at this stage are pagans and furnishing the burials of their dead. So I could look from my beach over across to Rousey and see the headland of Westness. And one of the burials there was a very wealthy Viking lady. And among the treasures that she had with her was a necklace. And I'm just going to read what I wrote about her necklace. This is only a little short bit. The Westness lady's necklace had 39 beads, 3 of bone, 3 of stone, many of Baltic amber. These are all carved natural substances, but the glass beads, of which there are also many, some of which are a multicolored mosaic and millefiori, represent a different level of investment. Beads are one of the commonest objects in furnished Viking graves. Men often have a few, perhaps carried in a bag or attached to a thong. Wealthy women have spectacular necklaces. Our Westness, ladies, is pretty low-key compared to the crystal, carnelian, garnet, gold, silver, and amethyst rocked by some of her contemporaries. Still, one of her glass beads, striped blue and white, comes from the Mediterranean or Near East. Others were probably made in France or Germany, others still in Scandinavia. The Arab commentator Ahmad ibn Fadlan, writing in the late 10th century, said of Scandinavian traders on the Volga that they prize green clay beads. They will go to any length to get hold of these. For 1 dirham, they procure 1 such bead and they string these into necklaces for their women. We don't know why beads were so prized, whether they were status markers or souvenirs of travel or protective amulets, all 3 maybe. Women probably accumulated beads over a lifetime. They strung them across their breasts on strings hooked to the lumpy oval brooches used to fasten their pinafore dresses at the collarbone. I like to think of mothers and grandmothers letting curious babies gum the hard, smooth surfaces, telling toddlers not to tug too hard, answering children's questions. Mama, tell me a story. She sighs and bats away a grubby little paw. Well, this plain stone disc at the back was the first bead I was ever given when I was only a little bit older than you. I made this one myself, whittled it from whalebone. Bjarni gave me this red and yellow one when he came back from Norway, the summer before he was drowned. Those amber ones were my mother's. She came from Gotland. The blue glass? Oh, I bought it from a trader with dark, smiling eyes who put into our harbour the same year that the Dun Cow had twins. The Westness woman was buried with her baby and presumably had died in childbirth. And one of the themes of the book is the relationship between mothers and daughters. And one of the reasons why I was swimming so much and swimming so obsessively is that I was still processing my grief for my mother, who died of motor neurone disease, 20 years ago now nearly. And using swimming as a way of thinking about very intense emotion and women's experiences particularly, and searching for the experiences of women in the landscape around me. I'm just going to read one of the Facebook posts, and then Rona, I'm just going to read another little short passage after that before we get on to questions, if that's okay. When I got down to the beach at dawn, it was deserted. Empty sky, empty sea, raining, everything grey except the beach. When the sand is dry, it is silver, but wet, it is gold. Everything very flat. The sand was rain-smoothed, seaweed-free, very few shells. The sea was flat calm, except for the little raindrop craters. It was so still and quiet, apart from a wren singing from the old fisherman's hut on the shore and the patter of the rain. But after I started swimming, life began emerging. First, a solitary male eider dabbling in the shallows, then a tern and a couple of gulls. 2 shell ducks flew over, and 4 more unidentifiable ducks bobbing a little further out. Then 3 seals arrived, swimming fast, popping up and down, one coming closer than he quite liked and disappearing with a huge splash. All good. And then just another little bit about swimming. That early hesitancy overcome, I have gone to the other extreme. I now prefer to swim on my own, before dawn and in the deep dusk, in the bitter cold, in the gale, always without a wetsuit, sometimes without a swimming costume. And yes, I know what my mother would have said, not about the nudity, but about the risk. Often, in all but the worst weather, there is an intrepid dog walker or 2 on the beach. But if I got into trouble, there wouldn't be much they could do to help, even if they were to notice me struggling. Would they plunge in after me, ring the lifeboat, the Coast Guard? The signal for mobile phones is poor out here in Evie. And there might well be no struggle, no panicked scream, no arm waving. That's not how drowning works. that's not how hypothermia takes you. But I'm not worried, not anymore. In part, this is because I know this beach very well. There are no hidden rocks, no turbulent undertow or unexpected cross currents. The sand shelves gently and the breakwater provides shelter, a safety net. I grew up swimming in the Indian Ocean in waters that held Portuguese men of war, stingrays, stonefish and cone shells, all potentially deadly. Nothing like that shares the water with me here. The seals swimming in the bay are curious, friendly, even playful, but they keep their distance and I keep mine. They have impressive teeth, but when you hear of someone being bitten, it's usually because they have approached a deceptively adorable newborn pup on the shore. Bull seals battle each other bloodily, but I've never heard of a seal biting a human in the sea. As for the apex predators, I tell myself over and over, no wild orca has ever attacked a human being, as though repeating the phrase will transform it into an eternal truth. I suppose I might get my toe nipped by an assertive crab or my thigh nettle stung by a jelly. No, the chief danger to me here, the only real danger, is me.
Thank you very much, Victoria. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay. Are you okay? Because I know it's quite a thing reading from something as personal as that, but you're okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Could you say a little bit about what you feel the differences are between memoir and autobiography, and why you chose memoir?
Oh, I think if you're writing an autobiography, I mean, you know, genre is a trap anyway. You know, you can write whatever you want to write, but if you commit to writing an autobiography, I think it's like a contract with the reader that you're going to start at the beginning and trundle along and tell essentially the story of your life honestly and not leaving anything major out. Whereas a memoir, which is what I've written, is a much more poetic structure. I didn't feel I was contracted with my reader to talk about everything. And one of the things that is happening in the chunk of my life that the book covers is the breakup of my marriage. And there is a little bit about that, but not very much and not very personal. And that just wasn't what the book was about. And I didn't feel that I had to talk about that. So I feel a memoir, I'm allowed to zigzag back and forth. I'm allowed to choose themes. I'm allowed to take my emotion and my relationships and my interests and weave them into something that's got a much more, I said artificial structure. That doesn't mean I'm not telling the truth, but it's like choosing to write a sonnet instead of just pouring it all out. You know, it's selective and it's juxtaposing things for effect. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. There's a comment in the Q&A from that terrible woman, Linda Semple.
Okay.
Yeah, who says, in a memoir, you can lie with impunity. Is that right?
Gosh. Well, I think that's an outrageous comment, Linda, to be honest. I certainly, I don't lie. No. I think you have a commitment to tell the truth. You don't have to tell the whole truth, and you don't. But the whole point of writing is to discover meaning, not to, pull the wool over someone's eyes.
I hope she's joking. I'm sure she is. Can I ask you, though, Victoria, you talked there about, you touched on the risk or not of swimming alone and swimming in wild water. And actually in the book, you talk about almost coming to grief when you were swimming off Iona.
Yeah.
Did that change your approach to swimming alone in wild water?
Yes and no. What happened on Iona was I think it was a riptide, and there were a lot of rocks, and it was high tide, and it was also late May and 4:30 in the morning, and there was nobody around. So I was being silly, and I wouldn't do that again. And but even then, you know, I knew that the first thing that you need to do when you're swimming, going into the water, is to check how you're going to get out. And I had swum there twice previously with somebody who knew the beach well, but that had been at low tide. But yeah, I mean, I learned a lot, and mostly I learned it the hard way. And things like hypothermia sneak up on you. You know, you go into the water. I mean, Claire will know this. You go into the water at this time of year, and after you've been in for about 15-20 minutes, you start feeling deliciously warm and relaxed. And that's a sign to get out. You know, not to lie back and think, oh yeah, Costa del Portobello.
Okay, so before we come on to your next couple of meetings, there are a couple of people asking questions at this point, so I'll perhaps come to them. So Tasha, can we stand by to put other people's microphones on? And I'm going to come first to Jane Harris. Jane has a question to ask, if that's okay. Jane, are you ready to speak? Don't worry, your picture won't come up.
Here I am. Hello. Just as well my picture hasn't come up, because I'm in my pajamas and I haven't washed my hair, and I'm chopping onions as I'm listening to you, and you're wonderful. One thing I wanted to ask was, what is your favourite form to write in? Hello?
Hello, yes, I'm thinking. Gosh, I really don't know. I really don't have an answer to that, Jane. I haven't written a novel for 5 years, and I want to go back to fiction, and I would like to write a contemporary novel because I've only written historical fiction. And at the moment I do feel a strong desire to go into that world where, I suppose, to quote Linda, you can lie with impunity because you are in
Yeah.
I got a bit sick of writing historical fiction, partly because people are looking to catch you out all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, they'll say something like, oh yes, but in the 9th century they didn't have glazed pottery. And I would start off responding by saying, yes, they did, and here's the site report where you can read about it. And then just realizing, no, this is fiction. You know, I can make the whole lot up. Even a historical novelist has no obligation to tell the truth all the time. And I got very pissed off with fiction, well, historical fiction. But it's tugging at me again now. But I did love writing Swimming with Seals. I loved being able to take, you know, all the junk that's in my head, you know, all the memories and all the ideas and all the funny juxtapositions, and weave them together on the page in a way that made sense of them to me, and also from the response I've had was meaningful for other people. So, you know.
Well, it's very lovely and poetic and profound. So I, for one, I'm looking forward to if you do a contemporary novel. I cannot wait.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. You can go back to your onions now.
Thank you. I am listening.
Okay, and one more question before we go into the next readings, and we're going to come to Linda Semple. Could you switch Linda's mic on, please, Tasha? There she is, just coming up now. Okay, Linda, you're clear.
Thank you. And of course, Victoria, I was joking about the memoir, but and I would very much look forward to you writing the contemporary fiction. My question is, you may already have answered it, actually. It's there are very few written records about some of the people that you have in your books. So, for example, about women, we don't have an awful lot of written records about secular and lower class women. And the archaeology can only tell us so much about people, but your point about the beads, for example, and then weaving a story around the necklace. Do you find that a constraint, or do you find that freeing as an author?
Well, again, it depends what hat I've got on. In fact, that on that, I'm going to read you the first paragraph from Dying and Death in Later Anglo-Saxon England, which is my academic book, which I don't do very often. But in mid-June 918, a woman's corpse was carried 100 kilometres across the West Midlands from her deathbed in Tamworth to her grave in Gloucester. The body was that of Ethelfled, Lady of the Mercians, 870 to 918, thereabouts, eldest child of Alfred the Great. But there is little more that can be said with certainty about this funeral. We do not know exactly how old she was, how she died, or what kind of medical treatment she may have had, whether her body went by ox cart or barge, whether she was embalmed or shrouded, carried in a coffin or on a bier. Nor can we say who attended her body on that last journey, who presided at her funeral, how elaborate that funeral was, what kind of grave awaited her, or what monument stood over it. We do not know how those who mourned expressed their emotions or how they commemorated her. Nonetheless, we know more about Ethelfled than any other Anglo-Saxon woman. In a nutshell, I think this is part of what drove me to want to write fiction. As an early medieval historian, I mean, my field of interest is around the year 700 to 1100. There's not very many men you can say very much about, and the women are almost invisible. And one of the things that I was trying to do in Swimming with Seals was just kind of keep looking for women's voices, whether it was in folklore, whether it was the mother and baby whose necklace I was talking about, just endlessly seeking for the women's voices. And I think my last novel, which is Daughter of the Wolf, has 4 women at the heart of the story, and they're all invented, they're all fictional. It's set in England in the middle of the 9th century, around the Humber estuary, and they're all women who are uncomfortable in their roles, whether it's the old woman who is finding the loss of status and the loss of her role as mother and matriarch really hard, as old age eats away at her, or whether it's there's a young woman whose father is the lord of the manor, effectively, and he's gone away and she has to step into his very much too large shoes. There's the daughter of the smith who wants to work with metal and can't. So just looking at the way that women might have engaged with what was expected of them, and trying really hard to get away from that historical novelist's thing of making a powerful woman character who's basically just, a man with breasts, and saying, oh, look, being powerful means fighting with a sword and having that kind of adventure, and therefore my powerful female character is going to fight with a sword. And instead, I've been trying to look at ways in which women were respected and powerful within their cultural context, instead of having to be my 3 least favorite words for historical heroines, which are badass, kick-ass, and feisty. Does that answer your question at all?
It does, yes, because I think we've all come across those historical novels where, in their possibly okay attempts to give women agency, they give you characters who are totally anachronistic and totally unbelievable. And I think it's wonderful to see a historical writer who doesn't do that. And I think if you're going to do your contemporary novel, there could be some very interesting stuff about crones in contemporary in the contemporary world. But I will look forward to it.
I better write it then.
Thank you very much. You can remute Linda. Victoria, I'm going to ask you now to read us another couple of pieces from your work, if that's okay.
Well, I am, and I've just seen a question go by in the chat. I can't see who it's from, but it's asking about swimming at the same beach every time, and saying that the questioner has visited Evie recently. I'm sorry, I can't see your name. Evie is beautiful. The reason I swam there all the time was because it's where I lived. I was 15 minutes walk from Edy Beach, and so it was, you know, very easy to get up and go swimming and come back and have a shower and then go to work and then come home in the evening and go swimming and have a shower and go to bed. But I did swim at a lot of other beaches. And I'm just going to stick with swimming with seals, I think, because I find it hard to read my fiction and to extract a little chunk out of a complex story. Whereas swimming with seals is more bitty. I'm going to read, actually not about swimming, but about Newark, which is in the East Mainland, so different beach. Newark Bay is in Deerness, and so in the East Mainland of Orkney, and it's this great big sandy, south-facing half-moon beach of quite shallow sand. So it does get lovely and warm by Orkney standards in July and August. But this is about walking along the shore at Newark. Among the crevices of the rocks are the stems of kelp, water-smoothed limpet shells, ravels of colourful nylon rope, the occasional sun-bleached cartridge case, the pale forms of bark-stripped driftwood. And then I see what I have been half-consciously looking for, a smooth curve of hard, whitish matter that could, at first sight, also be taken for driftwood. It is a human rib. I pick it up and weigh it in my hands, small and delicate, so light I can barely feel its weight. The shape is at once simple and complex, a beautifully modulated arc like a wind turbine blade, as fit for purpose as a seal's whisker. Ribs have a head and a tail, the thick, blunt cranial end, the sharper caudal end, the morphology of an eel. I try to work out which rib this one is, right or left, higher or lower in the thorax, to imagine it flexing with each breath, caging a pulsing heart, part of a matrix of muscle and ligament and cartilage. And that breath supporting a voice, language, song. This brittle white stick was part of a mind, body, soul, deeply encultured and embedded in family, community, parish, lordship. I think of the last time it pushed against the intercostal muscles, expelling the death rattle. I'm picturing it as a woman's rib, but only because I'm a woman myself. I hold the rib against my own abdomen, a best guess, trying it for size between my left breast and my waist, guessing it's one of the floating ribs, Costa fluitans, with its large head and pointy tail. Probably the 11th, the penultimate one, as the 12th is smaller, but I'm no osteologist, and I'm struggling to be sure without other ribs to compare it against. The last time I was here, there were several skeletons emerging from the striated face of the low cliff, all partial, embedded in the friable red clay, a bowl-like curve of cranium in cross-section, the knobby end of a tibia, coy, half revealed, the bones a deep orangey yellow when they first come into daylight, not much paler than the soil. Today, however, I can't see anybody in the cliff face. The winter has done a lot of damage to the sea's margins. Scribbling and overwriting, scouring its palimpsest. Tumps of grass overhang my head. Someone, perhaps the county archaeologist, perhaps the farmer, has shored up part of the cliff with sandbags, but they too have been tumbled about by the water. I get closer, always aware of the risk of falling rock. Boulders wobble beneath my feet. The cliff is boldly striped. The top layer nearly black, thick with burned material and shell. Still cradling the rib in my hands, I gaze at the stratum below the thick top layer of midden, let my eyes drift out of focus, stop looking, start seeing. First one, then a second skeleton. The first is just a femur and fragment of pelvis. The second is even harder to spot, higher up, on the same alignment as the first, but too far away to be part of the same individual. I can make out the ridged ripple of a spine and the snapped off stalks of the true ribs, squashed into the space of an inch or two between flat stones above and below. Impossible for the imagination to reclothe these skewed, compressed bones with flesh. They are becoming entirely mineral, all collagen scoured from their crumbly honeycomb. Little by little they erode, become brittle with light and salt and air, and the sea takes them. The Norse cemetery here at Newark was partially excavated in the late 1960s and early 1970s. My PhD supervisor dug here and told me stories. There was an elderly lady from a nearby farm who used to come and watch them at work. One day he asked her, "Have you always lived here?" "Oh, no, I only moved here when I married and I've never really settled." He was surprised, given her very local accent, and asked where she'd come from. She raised her arm and pointed across the bay. "There." The Orkney Museum store has many containers of material from this site, the bodies of Newark folk who died in the 11th and 12th centuries. They could be the ancestors of that old lady. Boxes and bags, some labelled only Norse baby bones. These were Christians. The chapel at Newark may be one of the earliest in Viking Orkney. Apart from one jet bracelet and a bone comb, there are no grave goods from the cemetery. Mourners do not bury skeletons. They bury people. These bones have never seen the light of day before. I'm afraid my cat is trying to tear the door down. If you hear meowing in the background, it's not hungry, it's just being annoying. Rona, should I read another bit now, or do you want to talk more?
Oh, please do. Please carry on.
Oh, okay. So when I started swimming in Orkney, I went from thinking these people are completely mad to being absolutely hooked in the space of about 2 weeks. I was part of a group called the Orkney Polar Bears, and we swam every Saturday morning. And the first couple of times I went along, and I didn't even get in the water, I just sat on the jetty and watched them, and I thought, they are insane. This was in August. They are completely insane. But they're having an awful lot of fun. And by the third Saturday, I was in there with them. Quite soon, the Saturday morning swims stopped being enough. I wake every dawn with the salt water tugging at my consciousness while I'm still drifting up from the midnight zone of dream. The craving for what the water provides, shock, numbness, struggle, has become as pervasive as gravity or magnetism, incessant as heartbeat. Days without a swim are like withdrawal, real pain. The polar bears only meet once a week, though, and I can't make every Saturday. My daughter is in proper school now, and weekends have become ever more precious. I have deadlines to meet, and I know there's a duty I'm dodging. I should be making time for my husband, finding a way to bridge this gulf between his island and mine. But none of these voices shouts louder than the call of the sea. What's more, although I am coping with, even enjoying the social aspects of being a polar bear, I find I want to swim alone. I need to take private ownership of this astonishing experience, this new relationship between my body and the sea. I look at the strand and the waves with different eyes now, proprietorial ones. There is nothing to stop me claiming the water for my own, whatever the time of year, the Beaufort scale, the temperature. I'm afraid to, though. And I can't work out why. It's not the thought of the seals or even the orcas. I've been an Orkney polar bear in all 4 seasons now. I've swum enough around these shores to have a repertoire, to know which beaches like Evie are safe as long as you pay attention, which bays like Scale have rocks which are concealed at high tide, which headlands like the Point of Ness have strong currents. I have a better tolerance of cold water and a good understanding of my body's response. I am learning how to get warm again. Nonetheless, I am reluctant. Too shy even to propose midweek swims to others, I wait until Helen or Yvonne or Anne suggests it and then happily go along. But left to myself, I look at the sea longingly, imagining the passionate shock, the buoyancy, the briny sting. And yet at the same time, my breath shortens and my shoulders tighten and hunch, as though something or someone is compressing me into an ever smaller space. It's like being back at a school disco, gazing at those who are brave enough to dance, finding it impossible even to imagine feeling myself away from the wall and crossing the gulf to join them. I don't understand this fear. It's different from the reluctance to put a warm body in a cold sea, which we all still feel at times. I remember being with Anne at the Point of Ness in Stromness one wild wintry day, looking at the waves dragging the shingle, the pewter sky and the distant trails of snow showers across Scapa Flow and the tearing current only a little way out. Oh God, I thought, do I have to? She caught my eye, read my mind and smiled complicitly. There was a glorious giddy schoolgirl moment of sheer naughtiness, evading the inner monitor, the vision of bunking off, the possibility of getting away with it. We don't have to do this. I won't tell if you don't. But peer pressure is a very powerful force, even in absentia. We screwed our courage to the sticking place and swam anyway, and it was wonderful. A roller coaster romp, letting the current carry us round the point and then wrestling it to get back to the beach. The seals were enjoying it as much as we were, only a few yards further out, but in the full force of the tidal stream that gives Stromness its name, letting it whirl them along, then swimming forcefully back to do it all over again.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. We've had a couple of comments in talking about beautiful words and imagery and wonderful writing and beautifully read. I would concur with that. So we've got a wee pile up of questions and I think they're going to drag you all over the place, but geographically and metaphorically, but we'll go for it. So I'd like to come first to Louise Nelson, who's in Ireland, and Louise wants to ask you something about the Book of Kells. Can we bring Louise in? This is like the Eurovision Song Contest, isn't it? Can we bring Louise in, please? Tasha, we've got Louise. Okay, Louise, just unmute you. On you go, Louise.
Hi.
Sorry, it's Neil, not Nelson.
Yeah, 12 points for Ireland. Sorry. Thank you so much for this gorgeous book. It changed my life. I left college and I was missing Chaucer and the Gawain poet. So you lured me in with the mythology, and every time I come out freezing from a swim or halfway into the ocean freezing and not wanting to go any further, I blame you.
Okay.
So thank you. But yeah, my question is, what is the strangest thing that you've come across in the Book of Kells?
Oh, Lord.
You mentioned mermen, but
yes. The strangest thing. Wow. Yeah, I'm just finishing up writing a book about the Book of Kells, and every time I go into it, it astonishes me all over again. The strangest thing. Well, I tell you something that's very strange. Is that on folio 202V, there is a painting of the Temptation of Christ, and there is Christ on the top of the temple in Jerusalem. And this little black figure, little inky black figure of the devil who is tempting him. And they've recently discovered, looking at that page under very high, I don't know, actually electron microscopes, but certainly very strong microscopes, that the figure of the devil has been stabbed repeatedly after the book was made, because the stab marks are actually visible on the next page down. Somebody's taken a very sharp little knife and gone all over the figure of the devil.
Thank you. At this point.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's understandable in one sense, but the idea of somebody engaging with the book, the point of destruction, to actually attacking it, is fascinating to me.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks very much, Louise. And we're going to go to Mandy Andrew now, and I think Mandy wants to ask you a question about quiet moments. Mandy?
Hi there, thanks very much. I just wondered, going back to the point where you were speaking earlier on about this swimming before dusk, and it just made me think about the silence and quietness of swimming before dusk pre your Iona incident. Must have been magical. And is this silence different from, say, a quiet moment during the day?
Yes. I mean, in Orkney particularly, you know, I did a lot of very early morning swimming, as well as late evening swimming in the summer months, and the sense of stillness, and particularly, you know, when it's really calm. I don't know how many of you know this particular bit of Orkney, but you're in Anglo Sound, which is the stretch of water between mainland and Rousey is the next big island. And then in between is Ainhallow, which is this little very magical uninhabited island. And the water is coming into the Sound from the Atlantic. And the seabed drops away west of Ainhallow quite sharply. So you've got the whole of the Atlantic coming in. And then either side of the little island of Ainhallow, it's really narrowly funneled. So there's always incredibly wild water either side of Ainhallow, whether the tide is coming in or going out. And then once you get into where the sands of Eby are, it's calmer. And on a really calm day, you know, it's like an infinity pool, where you can be in the water and then looking to the west towards Ainhallow, and you can see the surf. And you're actually kind of, although it's the best part of a mile away, you can see it at eye level, looking along the water, and the surf standing proud of the water by the island. And just the things that you notice when it's calm and you're on your own, and still, and you've got time, and you go back to the same place. It was one of the things that I really learned, was the extent to which the same place is never the same place, that every day is different, the light is different, the temperature is different, you know, the smells are different, the wildlife is different. And just learning to slow down and pay attention and value these little insights, and doing it on my own, not swimming around merrily blethering, which, you know, is also an activity that has its charms. I hope that's an answer that makes sense, Mandy.
It does. Can I just say, you just painted such a beautiful picture there. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. And that's echoing comments that we're getting as well in the chat. Barbara McFarlane says, who needs films when you can write this way? I feel as though I was with you on that beach. That's absolutely lovely. We're going to go to Sally Wainwright now to ask a question. Sally, we'll unmute you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for the book, Victoria. I really enjoyed reading it. I have to admit, it didn't make me want to go wild swimming myself, but it did, for the first time, make me understand why other people enjoy it. I struggle to get in the water when I spend time in Greece, so perhaps wild swimming in the North Sea isn't quite for me. But when I read the book, I was actually reminded of Corinne Polwarth's Wind Resistance, which seemed to me to do something that at the time I thought was extraordinary. And when I read your book, it did the same, which is take these completely unrelated stories and weave them into a coherent narrative. You know, you talk about swimming, or, you know, you go off into the imagined asides, like the piece you just read about the woman's rib, and you talk about Catholicism and the local wildlife and your childhood experiences, mother-daughter relationships, and they all somehow come together and make perfect sense. And I can't begin to understand imagine how you can kind of take all those totally different things and work out how to put them into a story. I think it's absolutely brilliant thing to be able to do, and I'm just fascinated how you do it.
Well, I'm going to go back to Jane's question, actually, about what's my favourite kind of writing, because my favourite kind of writing is when something happens completely unexpectedly that works, that's perfect. When you follow a thread, like Ariadne and Theseus in the labyrinth, you know, and you don't know where it's going to take you. And you find at the end of that journey, there is the perfect image. And I mean, one of the things that I tend not to read passages about when I'm reading from Swimming with Seals is the stuff about my mum, because it is still pretty raw and close to the surface, even though it will be 19 years next month since she died. And I don't want to come all, you know, teary in public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when I was researching motor neurone disease, and looking at these pictures of what a motor neuron looks like, and realizing that, you know, I'd just been writing pages and pages about kelp, and it looks exactly like kelp. And the way that, you know, the neuron has, it has like kelp, it has a holdfast, and it has a stipe, and then it has this frondy head, and that thinking about the way that the body functions and the echoes in the sea, and then, you know, and going down, you know, all these rabbit holes where, you know, these medieval and early modern ideas about every creature that lives on the land has got its, you know, its equivalent in the sea, which is why we talk about sea horses and sea cows. And, you know,
yeah.
But the idea that the internal, the way the body functions as a microcosm, and the way that it functions in the macrocosm of the world, and the, you know, all these things that get terribly, terribly wordy when you try to explain them, and then just finding this image of the motor neuron and the kelp and putting them next to each other,
Yeah.
and they fuse, and then they do something much more powerful than me taking 300 or 400 words to try and explain something simply by juxtaposing. And I did find writing it that kept happening, that I kept finding what seemed to me to be very rich poetic metaphors just by juxtaposing the stories, or by using the Little Mermaid. And I knew I was going to have to mention the Little Mermaid at some point, and then the more I went into that story and realizing, you know, the way that she is silenced, and the way that I was feeling silenced in my relationship at that time, and the way that my mother's disease progressed with, you know, one of the first things that she lost the ability to do was to speak. And just going back and back to the Little Mermaid and finding more, I don't mean Ariel, you know, I don't mean the Disney Little Mermaid, the original Hans Christian Andersen story. And that, you know, the silencing of women, and the suffering, and the things that you have to give up, and watching my mother learning to give up the power of speech and still retain her dignity and her ability to communicate, and just trying to find ways of processing all that emotionally and finding the images to do it was such an adventure.
Well, it sounds like you might have enjoyed writing it almost as much as we all enjoyed reading it. So thanks for doing that. And like the other person said, I'm really looking forward to the contemporary novel as well.
Well, it's 3 of you now.
Now it's a promise, Victoria.
That must be worth a bigger advance. So I'm going to come now to, we're fast running out of time, unfortunately. I'm going to come to Jill Dennis. Jill, are you there to ask your question?
Hi, hello.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Victoria. Yeah, so can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So that last passage you read absolutely speaks to me, because I'm a regular sea swimmer too. And actually, when I went to Evie in September, it was to look for you, to see if you were still around to swim with you. And then someone from the Orkney group said that you actually weren't living on Orkney anymore. So I just wanted to ask you, I read your book in the summer and I really enjoyed it. And I remember you speaking about yourself being the main danger, not the seals or the orcas. I can't remember the words, but you described that sort of sensation of when you're out swimming that you might not choose or want to choose to never swim in, you might stay in longer than you maybe should do, etc. Can you say a little bit more about that? What was going on for you there?
Ooh. Yeah, the sea is a very wonderful, I'm going to say place, but that's not quite the right word. The sea is a very wonderful and powerful companion. When I was writing Swimming with Seals, I started it when I was still living in Orkney and when I was still in my relationship, and I finished it after I had left Orkney and left my husband. So there was a lot going on there, and I just found that the sea was providing, the sea was just always there and always engaging and always taking me out of myself. You know, the sea was my therapist, and it was my GP, and it was my lover. In this very exciting, dangerous space where you are taking your life in your hands. You know, I know you're taking your life in your hands every time you cross the road, but it's not quite the same. And you know, the going into the water, sometimes when I was in a state of great emotional distress and still grieving for my mother, and just the shock of being forced absolutely into the present and into your skin. And the wild swimmers listening, you know, Claire, you're going to recognize this, Louise. But you can't do anything else except be in the moment. And that is the most powerful out of body, in body thing going on at the same time. And also that sense, you know, that if I found that I had a terminal illness, if I was diagnosed with something like motor neurone disease or terminal cancer, that going for a very, very long swim and not turning around and coming back is always there as an option, you know, just swimming until the hypothermia kicks in. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've had hypothermia a couple of times, and you know, I don't think that would be such a bad way to go. And this might sound like I'm being a little bit on the gloomy side. It doesn't feel like that talking about it. It feels like talking about going home. And then in the sea as well, I mean, one of the things I write about in the book, for those of you who haven't read it, is I grew up in Kenya, in East Africa. And the UK is a very safe and boring place until you go into the water. And in the water, you have, you know, these big carnivorous mammals, just like at home in Kenya. And just being aware of the seals and orcas. And, you know, at the moment in the Firth of Forth, there's a humpback whale that's been going back and forth between Inchkeith and Cramond all week. And just the sense of the wildness and the unknown of the water. As a place to go to and recharge and get rid of all this horrible ego rubbish and 21st century nonsense, and get back into your own skin, your wild skin.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. We're drawing.
Thanks, yeah.
Victoria, I bet you didn't have bloody midges in Kenya, never mind your wild animals and beasts.
Oh, Orkney's not bad for midges. Boy is bad.
Just to finish, Claire said that once she was walking across the causeway to Lindisfarne and she heard the seals singing, and she wondered if in all your encounters with them you had ever heard them singing.
Yes, I've heard them sing, and it's the most haunting sound. Especially in the evening when they're on the skerries offshore and there's a bit of a fitful wind and you hear them and you think it's a lost child or, you know, a grieving woman, and then, you know, you catch it for a little bit more sustained time and you realize that it's the seals quavering voices. Yeah, it's unforgettable.
Okay, thank you very much. So before I actually do the thank yous, can I just remind everyone listening that the Queen's Nursing Institute is a charity. We support nurses all over the community in Scotland, from oil rigs to care homes to trotting about with wee district nurses. But I do that anymore, but never, I like the idea of them on a bike. But we do it from grants and donations and legacies and so on. We're entirely dependent on money like that to do the work that we do with all of the community nurses across Scotland. So if any of you would like to go to the QNIS website, we've got a donate button there, and if you feel like slinging a tenner in our direction, that would be most welcome. So I would just like to thank everyone who's turned up tonight and given us their time and their questions. It's been really good, and I know that we could go on talking for another couple of hours at least. I think from the comments, people have been inspired and touched and felt that Victoria's words have resonated with something in them. And even if, as Sally says, you've absolutely no intentions of going in the sea, I think we can all identify with that feeling that makes us recenter ourselves when we come in contact with the power of nature. Victoria, it's been a fabulous evening. So grateful to you for supporting us and for giving us your time. It's been absolutely wonderful. We've been posting links to your books all night. And we'll just say that Victoria's next book is going to be a smash hit. It's about the Book of Kells. It will be as beautiful and lyrical as the rest of her writing, and it'll be out for Christmas, so buy the damn thing.
Yes.
Victoria, thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's been a joy, Rona. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll say good night to you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You're muted.
They've jumped off, so I don't know if they thought.
Yeah, we should have said, shouldn't we? Do please stay on for a couple of minutes afterwards. Hey ho.
Never mind. But I guess that was good. Lovely.
It was absolutely brilliant. It makes me. I must go and read her book, and
It makes me think.
Also need to reacquaint myself with the Book of Kells.
Yes. No, but I honestly think maybe I should try this sea swimming malarkey. It might be like right up my street. Actually, it sounds beautiful.
It is. It is really fabulous.
I'm so scared of being cold.
Find a secondhand wetsuit from somewhere.
Yeah, good shout.
But you need to bring John or a friend or someone with you.
Mm-hmm.
Are we still recording?
It's okay. I'll trim it.
Okay. Because the challenge